one thing that I would definitely do different than I did is I ended up micromanaging my own business for way too long. And so I've seen a significant increase in sort of the curve, the earnings curve, when I started hiring people to do the tasks that I didn't have to do, that other people could do for me.
Are you a solopreneur looking to 2 times your revenue to fund your lifestyle and give back? Well, this podcast is for you. We bring you inspirational guests sharing actionable tips to solve many of the struggles you face each and every day. And now over to your host, Paul Higgins.
Hello to the Build, Live, Give podcast. If you're a first-time listener, welcome. And if you're a regular, thanks for your support. Love to get your feedback at paul@buildlivegive.com. Our guest today is someone who was a trader for 10 years, both in Holland and also the US. And he never wanted to have that thought, what would entrepreneurship have been like? So he wanted to go out and experience it himself, because he could always go back to corporate, he could always go back to a trader, but he didn't want to say what would have been. So in the first 3 years, he really found it difficult. But what he did was ending up finding and turning his passion into his lifestyle business. And now he's riding one of the biggest waves going around. Actually, this is a pretty poor pun based on Jasper's love outside of work. Listen for that in the podcast. He loves to help people make a passive income through short-term rentals. And there's really 3 key reasons to listen. First is he gives you the 3 must-do actions when jumping into entrepreneurship. The second is how to leverage SEO to grow your organic reach. And the third thing is the importance of building a team sooner than you want. He's also got some great resources at getpaidforyourpad.com. So what I'll do now is hand you over to Jasper Ribber from getpaidforyourpad.com. Welcome, Jasper Ribbers from Get Paid for Your Pad to the Build, Live, Give podcast. Brilliant to have you on, Jasper.
Hey, what's up? Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Well, look, I always love to start with something that your family or friends would know about you that we don't.
Yeah, it can only be one thing. So I fiddle with my hair, especially when I think about something, when I'm concentrated and focused on something, and that's something that everybody who knows me has seen me do that, and I do it unconsciously. But yeah, that's something that everybody knows about me.
At least you've got hair. I
didn't want to. In Holland, we say, kicking in the open door.
Yeah, well, a lot of my friends don't like my hairstyle because I shave it every week. No clip, just a blade, but I can grow it. So most of my mates are like, hang on, I do everything to try to grow my hair and you take it off. But I think I know we're going to talk about cycling later, but I used to be a mad cyclist. I still ride every day. And I just found it so much easier. Never have had hair. And I also had a motorbike as well. So it was just easy. So I've sort of kept it.
Well, my hair is slowly falling out. So I'm probably going to follow your lead at some point in the near future.
Excellent. Well, look, I know you had a great career in trading, and then you've moved into, what is, I consider, a very high rising tide at the moment around Airbnb. But why don't you just take us through, what led you to move from a great career into your own business?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was a trader. I traded first in Amsterdam and after that in Chicago in the US. I kind of liked the job, but there was one thing that I've always kind of felt since I was younger, and that was that I wanted to do something different than the sort of the standard path that it's almost like laid out for you. You go to high school, you go to university, you get a job, and all that stuff. So at some point I realized that I had to make a decision, and if I wanted to do something different, and I wasn't sure what that was exactly, but the one thing that I did know was I wanted to travel, I wanted to have freedom. And so I realized, I have to either go for it. I'd rather go for it and fail and go back to corporate than, never having tried it and then regretting it later. So that's really the main driver. That was the main driver for me to quit.
And was it easier or harder than you thought when you actually finally took that step?
Well, the actual process of quitting the job was actually, it was not that hard. But yeah, the process that followed was definitely not without challenges. I think being an entrepreneur is probably that's the hardest thing that I've ever done in my life. That's today. I've definitely underestimated the challenges that would come with that, and how difficult it is to get people to pay for something that you offer is, in my experience, is quite challenging. It's very difficult. So yeah, it's definitely been a challenging road with lots of ups and downs and bumps on the road. But most importantly, it's a very fulfilling. For me, it's a very fulfilling thing to do, and it's very. I'm very happy I made that decision.
Yeah, that's great, and I think the old saying, nothing good comes easy, and I think that's the role. Like, I'm with you. I've spent 18 years in corporate, worked for a fairly large global company, lots of hard roles, but yeah, nothing is harder than running your own business. So I completely agree. And for people listening out there, and if you're just started and you're finding it really tough, get some support. But it is definitely something that we all go through, and it never seems to end, does it? Well, certainly I'll ask you, Jasper, does it sort of new challenges come up all the time? When you just solve one, do you think then another one comes along?
Yeah, for sure. But I have to say that now that my businesses are a little bit more established, it's you still get challenges, but they're better challenges, I would say. So it's funny because I often talk to friends of mine who have full-time jobs, and they when they follow me on Facebook or Instagram, it makes them feel very jealous. But that's the only thing they see. They don't see what I do day to day, right? They only see that picture when I'm doing something fun. But it's enticed a lot of my friends and people in my network to ask me and say, like, hey, I want to do something similar. Can I get some advice? And then I chat to them. And it's funny because on the one hand, you would say, yeah, I totally go for it. I want to be supportive, and I want to be positive and everything. But at the same time, if you look at the journey to become an entrepreneur, at least for me, it was so challenging that the first couple of years, I wasn't really making anything. And so I had a conversation with my friend, and I was like, are you sure you want to give up everything you have? You want to work your ass off for years without any guarantee that you'll make any money at all. You're definitely going to have a lot of doubts. There's definitely going to be a lot of people that don't believe in you, that are going to tell you that you're crazy. Do you really want to do that? So it depends on how you look at it, but yeah, I hope that answers your question, because I kind of forgot what your question was.
Yeah, no, look, it does answer it really well. And I think, when you're giving that advice, if you have to look back on your, I think it's and now about 5 years, is it, since you've been doing the get paid for your pad?
Yeah, get paid for your pet. I started 5 years ago, but I quit my job 10 years ago.
10.
So the first 5 years, everything I did didn't really pan out.
Yeah. So if you had to give sort of 3 bits of advice based on that experience, what would those 3 be?
Well, I'd say the first thing is that in order to build something, you have to put a lot of time and effort into it, and it's quite likely that it's not going to generate any money, or very little money, for quite a long time. In my case, several years. And so I think you really have to really have to be very passionate about what you do. You really have to think to yourself, hey, if I'm not getting paid for this for the next 3 years, would I still do it? Even if I knew I wasn't going to get paid for it, would I still do it because I really just enjoy doing it? If the answer is yes, then I'd say, go for it. But there's different types of businesses, and the type of business that I decided to create is it's a long grind. It's a long grind. So, I mean, I'm sure there's other type of businesses where you can see a payoff a little bit sooner or quicker or maybe you do it smarter than I did.
Yeah,
but,
great. So that's one. What's number two?
Yeah. So that's one. Number two is, I would say, get mentors as soon as possible. Like, find some people that have achieved what you want to achieve in your niche, and invest in yourself, and invest in mentors, because that can like give you so many shortcuts.
Brilliant. And number three?
Save you a lot of time. Number three, let me think. What's the other good advice? I'd say one thing that I would definitely do different than I did is I ended up micromanaging my own business for way too long. And so I've seen a significant increase in sort of the curve, the earnings curve, when I started hiring people to do the tasks that I was not, that I didn't have to do, that other people could do for me. So that would be my third advice. Like, as soon as whether you can invest some money into your business, or as soon as you have some cash flow that allows you to hire somebody, start hiring people, or not necessarily hiring, but at least outsourcing the tasks that you don't like and that other people can do.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant advice. I ran an outsourcing business for 5 years based out of the Philippines, and it was because I was consulting and coaching and mentoring people, and I was just, they kept not delivering on the activities they would. And when I looked in the detail, I'm like, why are you doing this? And I was a bit spoiled because a corporate, especially at Coke, always had an executive assistant, and you had lots of people helping you. So I think that's brilliant advice. So what we'll do now is go into the build section. So I think, your domain name's brilliant, but when someone walks up and says, "Hey, Jasper, what do you do?" How do you answer that?
I say that I help Airbnb and short-term rental hosts to be successful with their short-term rental business.
Great. And when people say, "Okay, so how do you do that?" What do you then say?
Then I say, I do that in various ways. I have a book on Amazon. I have a podcast, a blog, and there I provide free resources for people. But I also run an online coaching program for people who want to start and launch a property management business. And I also organize masterminds for people that have large property management businesses, or people that manage at least 25 units.
Great. And what do you know about Airbnb that many others don't?
Well, you know what? It's interesting. It's an interesting question, because one of the things that I always tell people is that Airbnb or short-term rentals is really not rocket science, right? There's not really like a lot of secrets. It's just about giving it 100% and just being very diligent with creating your listing and doing your research, like how do you rank well, and learning and educating yourself. And the interesting thing is that a lot of people, they go into the short-term rental space, which is hospitality, without having any experience, right? I mean, you wouldn't run a hotel with no hotel management experience, but most people go into managing their short-term rentals without any experience, and as a result, a lot of people are not really well prepared to run that business. So it's really not that hard, but you have to educate yourself because there's a lot of competition. And so if you ask me what's something about Airbnb that you know that almost nobody knows, I'd say like I don't think there is anything.
Yeah, but I suppose what's becomes so common for you, I suppose, isn't for others. Because in 2016, we spent 8 weeks going through Europe, and I'd say probably 80% of accommodation was through Airbnb, and just the differences and the inconsistencies between the properties, i.e. the owners, was a real standout to me. Is that still fairly common across the Airbnb? I'm talking about Airbnb specifically, not just short term, but is that pretty common? Do you still see that?
You do still see that, but I'd say in the major markets, the expectations of the guest have really gone up, and I think in line with that, the professionalism has gone up. So hosts in general are doing a better job. So in the main markets, at least the big markets. So it's definitely improving as the education improves, and there's more competition. So you can't really get away as a host anymore by just offering a subpar experience. You really have to know what you're doing and learn a little bit about hospitality in order to be successful in Airbnb now. So it's definitely improving.
Excellent. And, you've got some great assets, and I know you've got the mastermind. What sort of drives new clients to your business?
Well, I'd say mostly it's because they want more bookings, right? And that's the case for, so I have 3 businesses. So Get Paid for Your Pad is really for anybody who wants to do something in the short-term rental space. And there, I get a lot of people that want me to look at their listings because they want more bookings, or they want to make more money. That's usually the main driver. But for my other businesses, the online coaching program, that's for people that want to, a lot of people want to get out of the corporate world, and they see that there's opportunities in the short-term rental space, and so they want to build a business. They want to essentially become an entrepreneur.
Yeah. Great. And how do you find them? Like, is it on social platforms, paid ads? What's been the best way to get people to those great services and products you provide?
Yeah, so for Get Paid for Your Pad, it's always been organic, and that's also because I kind of started as a hobby, and so I just started to publishing podcasts and writing on my blog. And all the traffic's been organic. To be honest with you, I did educate myself on SEO before I started for the blog posts. But the only ads I've ever run are for occasionally like boosting a blog post or something on Facebook. But also for the coaching program, STR Profit Academy, we do run some ads to a webinar where we then provide information, and then at the end we pitch the coaching program.
Great. And have you seen? And sorry, those ads on they normally Facebook, Insta, YouTube.
Yeah, they're Facebook. Yeah,
Facebook,
just Facebook. Yeah.
And have you seen? I know there's a lot of talk these days around live versus replay. Have you seen any shift in your webinar model of people preferring more a replay than live?
So we do our webinars live.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, my business partner usually runs them, but we've done them together as well. Now I know what you're talking about, because now there's a lot of different types of webinars, right? You got the just-in-time webinars where I feel like it's a little bit misleading, because when people tell me that there's a live webinar, I'm expecting somebody to actually be there live, but
Yes.
then oftentimes you get a recording, right? And so. And then you're looking at somebody, and you're in the beginning you're not sure if it's live or not, and then that person says, "Hey, if you have any questions, put them in the chat," and then kind of creating this impression that you're communicating live, but then the question just goes to an email, So yeah, we don't really like that. We when we do a webinar, it's a live webinar, and people can actually ask questions and yeah.
Great. And what have you sort of learnt from doing webinars? If you had to give us a couple of key learnings, what are your big ones?
Well, I say first of all, there's a whole structure around it, right? There's the funnel around it. Like it's like really have to think about the customer experience, and you want to think about like what you're communicating, the follow up. So it's more work than you initially I thought, right? So it's you want to make sure that when people sign up for the webinar, you send them reminders and you send them some value emails to keep them engaged, and then also during the webinar, how do you manage if there's lots of people that are asking questions, for example? How do you keep the flow? How do you keep people engaged? It's really difficult because these days, the attention span is very short, right? So things like, telling people in the beginning of the webinar, like, hey, turn your phone off, put your phone on airplane mode, and literally you have to instruct people like, hey, you should focus on this, get rid of your distractions, because otherwise you tend to see a drop off.
Yeah, look, that's great tips. And you talked about SEO. Like, SEO to me has always been a can of worms that I've never really opened. So, what's been your experience with SEO? Because obviously you've had a lot of organic traffic. Yeah. What's been your experience with it?
Yeah. So I started looking into SEO back in 2010 when I first quit my job. That was actually one of the first things that I started looking into and learning about. And I built some businesses around that worked okay for a while, but weren't really, I wasn't really passionate about it. So it was a short-term thing. But you know what? Like, SEO has changed a lot. Like 10 years ago, you could kind of manipulate the algorithm, and so it was kind of easy to to target certain keywords and get a lot of traffic if you knew what you're doing. I think those times have changed. I think right now what really works well for me is just creating, number one, just creating really, really good content, and number two, consistently publishing content. Those are the two most important things. So I would say the Google algorithm has become a lot more, has become a lot better. It's been improved a lot, because the goal, obviously, that Google has with its algorithm is to provide the best possible information to a search query. And I think they're doing a much better job now. That also means that, there's no tricks and shortcuts, or maybe there are some, but it's not as much as they used to be. Right now, it's just about create really, really good content. And when I say good content, I mean, you want to have long form content, so not just 300 words, but I'd say you want to do at least 1,000 words, and you want to put some. You want to think about the design as well, because Google looks at how much time people spend on your page. So you want to make it digestible. You want to, maybe put a video in there. So those are things. It's pretty honest now, the system. Those who create good content get a lot of traffic is my experience now.
Yeah, great. And look, I think it was always going to go that way, and I'm glad it is. I also know now with podcasts as well that Google's rewarding people for podcasts, so they're a lot more searchable than what they were. And I've just heard Apple now with Siri actually does a transcription of the podcast automatically as well. So I think
that's great.
Yeah, so I think if you haven't got a podcast, if you're listening, you haven't got a podcast, I'd certainly highly recommend a podcast. And I know Jasper, you have, and I'll put the links to that in the show notes. So you talked about one of the biggest things for you was micromanagement and then building a team. Just what are some key things you've done to successfully build a team?
Well, I mean, it's all about finding the right people, and then managing them. So I guess, I don't know, maybe I just got lucky, but I found one person that's doing an incredible job for me. How do you find the right people? It's kind of hard. I'm not really an expert on building teams, or at least like I don't view myself as one. But what I did learn is that when I was still micromanaging everything, for some reason, and maybe it was my ego, but I always was hesitant to outsource because I was thinking, well, that person that I hire is not going to do as good of a job as I am. But actually, what I've come to realize is that the people that are in my team right now, they're actually doing a much better job than I do. So it's, I once heard a person saying, if you hire somebody that does 80% of the job that you do, then you've just you've upgraded yourself from 100 to 180%.
Yes.
But I would even argue in my case, I think I've gone, from 100 to like, I've hired somebody who's like 130% of myself. So, so it's been very, and just not having to do the tasks that you don't like, that you don't feel inspired to do, just frees up so much brain space, and it just it gives me more inspiration to just work on the things that I really enjoy working on.
Yeah, great. And look, I know you've got a virtual assistant. Just, tell people listening about your experience with a virtual assistant, whether you'd recommend one or not.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've actually had a fair amount of virtual assistants. Most of them were based in the Philippines, and I'd say it's really great to have a virtual assistant. I'd say there's a couple things that you have to be aware of. Number one, your VA is as good as your systems of training the VA, right? So in the beginning, when I hired VAs, I was always, I was getting a little frustrated because they wouldn't do the job right, or they weren't as efficient, and I, that would frustrate me sometimes. But then actually on my last mastermind in Puerto Rico for the events that I organized, the masterminds, there was somebody who was attending, and that person said this exact same thing. So I'm just stealing. I didn't make this up. I'm stealing this from her. But she said, your VA is as good as your system, because if your VA makes a mistake, or that means you're not providing the right instructions, right? Because you can't expect your VA to to be very creative and come up with like new ideas and all that stuff. The VA is there to perform tasks, and it's up to you to provide clear instructions so that the VA can do the job.
Yeah, look, I think that's so true. And like I said, I ran a VA business for 5 years, and I always said to people, owners, it's in a coaching model, there's above the line and below the line. And above the line is you, and below the line is the VA in a coaching sense. And I always said, start with above the line. So exact same thing you're saying. Have you done everything for that person to be successful? And then once you've gone through all of that, and then if it's a performance issue, well, then that's fine. But yeah, I do find people default to performance before the system. And
right.
So look, completely spot on. So before we go into the live section, I would like to tell you about my book called Build, Live, Give. I go through the lessons I learned from leaving Coca-Cola to run my own business, how I grew it to a high six-figure business whilst having a transplant. I will give you the exact 5 steps which I've used to help 171 solopreneurs to double their business to fund their lifestyle. Just go to buildlivegive.com and download my free chapter of the book. And there'll also be all the links in the show notes. So the next section is the live section. So tell us about your daily habits which make you successful.
Well, I'd say, is this the free habits that we talked about before?
No,
be more effective?
That'll you've been well prepped, but no, that'll be in the action section. So this is just, think about your morning routine. What are the things that you do that help you be successful?
Yeah, so I would say productivity has been one of the major challenges. As an entrepreneur, nobody tells you what to do. You don't have to do anything, so you can pretty much do nothing all day and no one's going to say anything, right? So productivity has been a challenge, and I'd say there's a couple things that have really helped me. First of all, it's nutrition and exercise. So I prefer not to eat any types of sugars or high glycemic index carbohydrates, because they make me tired and they make me have ups and downs. So I stick to foods like vegetables and beans, mostly whole foods.
Yes.
And that I found that gives me a more constant high level of energy throughout the day. The other thing that has really helped me is to drink a lot of water, especially in the morning. I think the first thing people tend to think that the first thing they need is breakfast. But I've actually noticed that if I just get up and I drink a lot of water, and I don't have to eat anything, right, to have energy, honestly. Like, I do a lot of intermittent fasting. So oftentimes I eat at 12 or 1 p.m. and I'm usually full of energy in the morning. Right. And actually not having food in your stomach to digest actually gives you energy, because I think it takes up like 25% of your energy to digest the food. Right. So yeah, waking up, just drinking a lot of water until I'm hydrated, and then not eating too much. Like, eating a lot really tires me.
Yeah.
It's one thing I realized. So that's one thing that really helps.
Yeah, brilliant. And look, I'm a huge proponent of the water. I did a lot of neuroscience, and it obviously talked about that. But having a kidney transplant, I've got to drink about 4 liters a day. So I'm just constantly, I don't go anywhere without a drink bottle. I've got them everywhere where I could forget. So, I completely agree with that. So if you don't drink water, I know they recommend about 2 liters a day, but it is critical. And ultimately, your brain is what leads to all of your success, and water's a huge contributor to that. And, what do you love to do when you're not working? So, what's a day off for you look like?
Yeah, so I love the ocean and any type of sports that you can do in the ocean. So I scuba dive a lot. I kite surf, but I'm also a fan of other types of surfing, or just swimming, just like playing around in the waves, or going on a little boat out on the ocean, sailing, all that kind of stuff. I love just being on the ocean. Gives me a sense of freedom. There's just so much space. So that's if I have a week off, I'm gonna be in the water.
Great. So I'm assuming you don't spend a lot of winters in Holland.
That's correct. Yeah.
Travel the world. And then, you've got the business model to be able to do that. Next section's the give section. So what's a way you give back, a charity, a community, something you're passionate about?
Yeah. So I actually got into a cycling, well, it's not a competition. It's a cycling tour, basically, that's organized by a friend of mine who lost his father to prostate cancer. And so what we do is every year we cycle for 600 miles. So last year we did Paris to Monaco. This year we're going to do Monaco to Rome, and we raise money for prostate cancer research.
That is brilliant. Having a father-in-law that passed with it, and other members of my family, I think that's great. And as I said previously, I've been a keen cyclist. I think that's excellent. Is there, maybe we'll get a link that people can donate that are listening? So I'll grab that link off you, unless you know the link now, but I'll grab it off you after the podcast.
Yeah, the organization is called Prostate 1000, and the 1000 is the number.
Yeah.
So if people Google that, I'm sure they will find it.
Excellent. Great. All right, brilliant. But we'll also put that in the show notes as well. So the last section is the action section, where I asked you some rapid fire questions and get some rapid fire responses. So the first is, what are your top 3 personal effectiveness tips?
Number 1, get up when you wake up and don't snooze in bed. Yep. Number 2 for me is get out of the house. So don't work at home. Go to a coffee shop. Go somewhere where you feel inspired. And then number 3 is something that we have discussed already is outsource.
Excellent. And technology. What's a technology other than the Airbnb app that you couldn't run your business without?
There's a tool called Once Hub, which you use to schedule appointments.
Once Hub, HUB?
Yeah, Once Hub.
Okay, excellent. Well,
it's like Calendly.
Excellent. Yeah, we use Book Like a Boss, but yeah, I think there are any of those are brilliant, and that combined with a VA, you've got it made. The last one is, what's the source of your new ideas? How do you get all of those great ideas to run these 3 businesses?
You know what? It's interesting. Most of my ideas actually come from my podcast guests.
Excellent. You know what? I do the same. I'm taking massive amount of notes down here. And just on that, because I know we didn't really talk about it, but people that are looking to get Airbnb rentals, if I just quickly ask you that, is it better to book, 6 months out, 3 months out, closer to the date? What are your tips for people that are booking Airbnb?
So people that want to stay in an Airbnb.
Yeah.
So I don't think that there's a kind of a standard rule as to when the prices are most attractive. Like, with flights, for example, they say it's like 6 to 8 weeks in advance is typically the best time to book. Because the thing is, like, Airbnb hosts, the way they set the pricing is very, very, it's how do you call that? It's not everyone uses a different strategy, right? And so I would say, there's really good deals to find on Airbnb, and I stay in Airbnbs all the time myself. So I would suggest definitely spend a little bit of time like looking at different places, and if you're flexible in terms of dates and locations, you can find really, really great deals because there are Airbnb hosts that are not pricing their units competitively. So they just have a certain price in their head, and they think that's a good price, and that's what they charge. But sometimes that's like way lower than what they could be charging. So if you spend a little time, you can find really great deals.
Great advice. So the last question is probably the biggest. I've kept it to the last one, is what impact do you want to make on the world?
Well, I want to be first of all, a source of positivity and inspiration. I find it very fulfilling to make a positive impact on other people's lives, and that's the biggest driver for me.
Brilliant. Excellent. Well, look, it's been wonderful having you on the podcast. I don't think anyone listening wouldn't have stayed in an Airbnb, for one, but I think there's also lots of people listening that are looking for passive income. They might have a holiday apartment or a holiday house, etc. And I think you've given some great advice here, but also I know there's a lot more advice. So you can go to getpaidforyourpad.com, and on the main page there, Jasper's got a lot of excellent resources for anyone interested in this space. And I know I'm about to buy a holiday house, so I'll definitely be checking it out myself. So Jasper, thanks a lot for coming on the show today.
Well, thanks for having me, Paul. It's been a pleasure.
Excellent. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Build, Live, Give podcast. If you like what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a review. It would mean the world to us.